I hope they can see us. Yes, this is the thing. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. You are at Make Vote Builder Data Your Friend. It's sponsored by County to County program, which is out of Orange County Democratic Party and partnering counties, because I myself, Lamanda Pryor, is from Durham, North Carolina, and I have Chris
and Delina.
Also
from Durham.
Also from Durham. At this time, you can please type into the chat pod and tell us your name and your county if you have not already done so. We have with us Aaron Fry, who will be our IT person today. He will be able to look into the chat box at this time to make sure that you are able to locate where to place questions in that chat box. So at this time, we're going to give you just 2 seconds. Type your name and your county.
So today's agenda, we'll be giving you an introduction to the webinar, and we're going to be talking about Votebuilder today. How can I assess the information? How can it be used? What do I need to do to use Votebuilder? The structure of VAN. It's broken down into 2 major components, My Voters and My Campaign. And we're also going to talk about how to get the most out of Votebuilder. It's a very powerful tool for canvassing. So some of the things you can do with Votebuilder, you can create lists of voters to go and canvass. You can build scripts, which are a list of talking points and questions to discuss with the voters. You can cut turf, which is setting up a specific geographic area within your district or county to go canvass. From these cut turfs, you can generate call and walk lists. You can set up a phone bank. Create a canvas, also scripts, and then we're going to talk about taking questions from the audience.
And I want to remind everyone, this is not about the technical side of Votebuilder. This is how to use the information that you will be receiving from Votebuilder or that you can ask for from Votebuilder. So again, this is not the technical webinar on exactly how to use Votebuilder. Again, I'm Lamanda Pryor, and we have Chris and Delina. And here we have, for our backup support, Aaron Fry and Jenny McMillan will be looking at questions. So if you have a question, please make sure you type it into the chat box or chat pod, some people know it as. And Jenny will make sure we get the questions. And if we can, Chris and I will try our best to answer them as we go. Again, just communicate with us. Just take a second, please, and just make sure that you're able to go into the Zoom group chat at this time.
Okay, a note about some of the questions. We may not be able to answer all the questions as they arise, but we will pause from time to time to answer a few different questions during today's session. Feel free, again, to type your questions into the chat pod when you think of them. And we will monitor these questions and answer them as we are able to during this webinar. So what is Votebuilder? Votebuilder is an online database and is often referred to as VAN. This database contains 2 sections. One is My Voters, which I mentioned before, and this contains information about every registered voter in the state. And My Campaign, which allows political parties and candidate campaigns to track and manage their volunteers. So Votebuilder is exclusive to the Democratic Party, and it's used by every state Democratic Party and Democratic candidates at the federal, state, and local races.
Exactly.
So the My Voters section, this again has information about every voter in your state or district or county. So this information is updated from the state voter file, the North Carolina Board of Elections database, and you can use this to target and track voter communications between your canvassers and the voters, and obtain information from the voters through survey and canvassing as well.
Then you have My Campaign. My Campaign is updated by each committee. It's used to make a list of volunteers, email them, and track volunteer opportunities. Please note, do not contact voters through My Campaign, because My Campaign does not update with state voter files. If you look for voters, look in My Voters. So if you're looking for the voters, go to My Voters. If you are looking for volunteers, look in My Campaign.
So we want to point this out because some of the information you do want to share with other people that are in, you want information to go to county parties and stuff like that. You may want to share that information, not keep it to yourself.
Exactly. So you want to make sure that you're going into the right ones to ask for either voters or for volunteers. Then you say, why use Votebuilder? Why should I use Votebuilder, Chris?
Well, it does make your life easier. It's, believe me, it is a lot easier to use the Votebuilder tool if you have access to it than building your own database of voters, which you can do, and I don't recommend. I've tried it myself. It's a lot of data.
So Votebuilder is updated monthly with the North Carolina State North Carolina State voter checklist obtained from the state of the Secretary of State, which has up-to-date registration information in all North Carolina voters. Votebuilders contain voting history information from North Carolina general, primary, presidential primaries, and municipal elections in one easy to search place. It has years of collecting survey responses from voters. Contact have helped create the likely party model. It contains a Votebuilder, which classifies North Carolina voters as Republican, Democrat, or Independent. There's no other database available in North Carolina that has this much exclusive information. So the main reason, as Chris said, to use Votebuilder is because it has collected data over time in one place. So you're not going to all the different resources to try to gain voters or try to figure out where to find volunteers. Votebuilder has done this background information for you.
Yes, exactly.
And we're just looking at some of the questions, trying to see if we can answer some. And some of this goes into exactly the technical part of Votebuilder. We have some that says, how are prosperity scores determine propensity? And that's really is a technical question about Votebuilder.
Yes, and that's something that the state party doesn't really discuss too much.
Right. How
they determine this. There's a lot of information that goes into determining that.
And there are some trainings that they do have for the Votebuilder technical tool. You may want to look into that particular, that the state sponsor for that type of training to find more information about that.
That is a good question. So I think everyone has a different opinion.
Right.
I found that in my precinct, and we had limited resources, but the people we targeted seemed to turn out and vote readily when we contacted them. Oh. Yeah, so at least in my precinct, and I think maybe in Durham in general, this election cycle, the targeting seemed to work fairly well.
Right, and what we're talking about is how reliable are propensity scores, and we were saying that this has been kind of debated to and from how reliable they are, and so Chris was referring to how we have used it in Durham this past elections cycle.
So we have another question here. You want to tackle this one too? So this is how frequently is Votebuilder updated based on canvassing information? And I can kind of answer this. It's kind of going to depend on your data team. If you have a big data team with lots of members and you have a really well set up pipeline to get the data back into Votebuilder, it could be that day. It's going to depend on your specific situation.
So what happens is each county has certain people, and we're going to talk a little bit about who has access to Votebuilder. And when you have lists and they give lists out, they require for you to update the particular list like in a handwritten style, and then you return it back to whoever access to your Votebuilder in your county. And they are the ones that will be the ones determining and updating the information. And so how fast is the update or how frequently really depends on the person in your county or the people in your county who's responsible for, I say, for the upkeep of Votebuilder. And so we're going to keep going.
So a quick summary of why, again, anyone would use Votebuilder. I think we've talked about some of these aspects.
Right.
It gives you access to the state voter file, and you don't have to build it yourself. You have demographic information on your voters. You have their voting history, their party affiliations, contact information, and how the party has reached out to them in the past. You have all this information in one place.
Right. And so if you're new, like a new county leader, or you're new to your precinct, being able to go to your county party, determine who has access to Votebuilder, will give you access to the information you will need for your particular precinct. So who has access? That's always the question. Can I have access to Votebuilder? Who has access to Votebuilder? Access is managed through each state level Democratic Party. Each person in their county should go through their county Democratic Party leader to gain access to Votebuilder. So if you're in your county, you would need to find out who's your county Democratic Party leader to gain access. If you're not sure who to contact in your county, if you do not know who your party leader is, or you're just not sure who I should contact to get access to Votebuilder, you can always go to the North Carolina Democratic Party, because access is given with a purpose. Everyone is not just granted access to Votebuilder. So it's very important that you continue to go to your county leader or your county Democratic Party leader to gain access. Some counties do have data buster teams, and those teams are used to actually do the nuts and bolts of Votebuilder.
And I'm a volunteer on the Durham Data Busters team. So we got a couple more questions.
And I'll let Chris take this next question, because I think this is some of the things that he does being a data buster in Durham.
So it kind of depends on the data buster team. I do look at the notes. Sometimes people, when they're using the digital tools that interface with Van, such as the Minivan app on a smartphone, you can actually type in notes. Or you can also do this on the paper list as well. You can leave little notes. And this information can be entered. There are data items where you can put it into the Votebuilder system, or transcribe it and put it in the system. Okay. So generally, when I see the notes, I will try to put them in to the database.
Okay, so again, if you want to have additional training on the technical part of Votebuilder, please go to NCDP for technical Votebuilder training. And remember, to do these and to update information, you have to have access to Votebuilder. And again, we can't stress enough, everyone is not granted access to Votebuilder. Access is granted through your county party leader to access the information in Votebuilder.
And that's more of a technical question, I guess.
I would agree.
Yeah. So how can this information be used? Well, this information can be used to identify voters that are supportive but may not actually want to come out and vote in that particular election. They might need a nudge. So you can create a walk list, a phone list, a mailing list to go find these people and get them out to the polls. Mm-hmm. You can also use this information to write scripts and use survey questions, which will then go back into the database and give the party in general a better idea of what their voters are thinking. Mm-hmm. You can use this information to map out walk locations for your canvassing team, or to make lists for phone banking. And you can also use it to contact and manage your volunteers. You can find recruits in the database. Anyone who has ever said they would be willing to be a recruit and it's been logged, you can just pull a list of all these people, and you can also use it to schedule events like phone banking and canvassing.
It's a great place to start when you're just trying to get a list of people in your district to do, as Chris said, a walk list, a phone list, a mailing list. If you're looking for scripts, your map out areas, it's just a great place to go to get the information of your people, so you're not going from resource to resource.
I see we got a question about the phone numbers. Yes, this has been a okay. Is there some way to prevent the national and state hired vendors from overwriting locally collected data? And this comes up all the time. All the time. No. But there are ways around it, but it might be out of the scope here. You can just pull phone numbers for your voters that were entered by your Canvas people. You can ignore the phone numbers if you need to. You just need to talk to your Votebuilder data team, and they can actually pull this data for you.
Good question.
Frequent question.
Mm-hmm. We wanted to share an example of how you can use Votebuilder. In this example, it's like you might have 18,000 people in your district, 8,000 are registered Democrats, 5,000 of these Democrats voted in one of the last 2 general elections. So you can use a contact list and contact these voters and identify your supporters. Then follow up and make sure that supporters get out and vote on election day. There's so many different ways and different lists that you can pull. I know for me in Durham, we had a target on minority women who had voted in the last presidential election. And so I went to the Data Buster team, or the person who had access to my Votebuilder, and I asked them to pull the data from my district of the minority women who voted in the last presidential election. And I was able to get that particular information and that particular list built. And then I used that list, we did some canvassing, and then we also did some calling. So there's just many ways that you can use Votebuilder, and many ways to know exactly what to ask for. I just want to add this. Before asking for the list, make sure you have an idea of what you're trying to accomplish.
Yes.
That really helps determine what type of list you're going to ask for from the Votebuilder.
Yeah, it could be just you want to go out and talk to the Democrats and educate them about issues that might be in that particular election. That would be a different type of list than get out the vote list of people that you don't want to go talk to the people that are going to vote, but the people that need a little nudge to get to the polls. And there's a lot of different type of lists that you can get from this database based on your needs.
Exactly.
So creating a walk or call list. If you want to look up a group of people within your district or area, you will need to ask for a list first from one of the data team people in your area. Depending on why you need this list and what you're trying to accomplish, it'll help you determine what list to give you, kind of what we just mentioned. So much of the same profile information can be selected to narrow your search and find specific voters in your area.
Again, when creating your list, just determine what you need it for. As Chris just stated, if you want to look for particular people in your district or in your city, make sure you know exactly what you're going to use the list for, and your Data Buster team can also help you create that list if you let them know what you're trying to use the list for. As Chris said, it could be to just get people out to vote.
Yeah. We have another question.
Okay, you can read the question for me, Chris.
Sure. So this question asks, are candidates data and data party merged? Sorry. I believe they are eventually. They might not be in real time,
right?
But eventually all the data should make it back into the database.
Exactly. At some point, it does make it back and merge into the database. But the timing is just the timing can be a lag time to get all the information back into the database.
Oh, we have another question here. What information can we get on unaffiliated voters? That's a great question. This is a Democratic resource, but there's a lot of unaffiliated voters out there that lean Democratic. And yes, you can get essentially all the same information.
Yes, that's a very great question because I know with the upcoming elections, it could be kind of important for us to look at those unaffiliated.
Yes.
So that's a great question to know that you can go into Vote Builder and get some of that information.
So a little bit about the turf cutting tool. So this is a great tool to help plan out your canvassing, especially if you're using paper lists. So you have to divide your area into sections to give these lists to your volunteers, and you want to make sure that they don't overlap. So using this tool, you can geographically outline smaller areas of your district or precinct into easily walkable turfs with a map.
And people call that turf cutting.
Yes.
So if you hear that term used a lot, turf cutting, that's exactly what it is, as Chris said.
So in general, a volunteer or a pair of volunteers can canvass about 60 doors in 2 hours.
Now, this is a statistical.
Yes, yes.
Sometimes in practical time, it may vary. So don't get stuck on, I have to do 60 doors in 2 hours. This is just what the average they're saying you should be able to do.
It really depends on where you live and how close the residents are.
Exactly.
So Vote Builder allows you to plan out your maps according to where and how you want your canvassers to go. I mean, if you see a residence that's maybe way outside of a cluster of other residents,
Right.
you may not want to include that one in that particular walk area. So this can be adjusted. So Vote Builder only saves these lists that you can generate from the turf cutter for about 30 days, and then they disappear from the database.
And I had to learn this the hard way.
Yes.
I didn't know it was only saved for 30 days.
So you may want to try to make things easier on your data team and get them the list before they expire, because we really need to get this information back into the database. It does help all Democrats.
And people always want to make sure that the information is updated correctly. So it's very important that you get the list and the updates back to the Data Buster team within the 30 days so they can update it.
It's good to get them back as soon as possible. Don't take 30 days. Try to get them back as quickly as you can. But you have 30 days. So this is a sample call sheet of what a phone banking list would look like. You would have the voter's name, their party affiliation, their gender, their age, their phone numbers that they have in the system, whether or not it's a cell or a landline, their precinct that they vote in, their van ID, and this is not to be confused with the North Carolina voter ID number. It's different.
Please, make that very clear, Chris.
Yes. The van ID is not the same as your Board of Elections voter ID number. They're two different things. Sometimes the data team might ask you for van IDs if there is an issue. So be sure you give them the right number. Also, email addresses if they're in the system, if they've been collected by maybe a previous canvas. And this, again, is one of the benefits of using Vote Builder, because you're not going to find emails in the Board of Elections database, I don't believe.
No. And again, Vote Builder is just a great tool to use because it puts all the resources and all the information in one location. So that's why it's important to continue to work with your Vote Builder data team in your county, making sure that if you ask for a call list, you turn back so all the information can be updated. If you ask for a particular turf, make sure a particular map, make sure you're turning that back in, because information you find out could be very useful when the next person is beginning to look at the particular turf. So it's always important to have that back and forth and getting the information to and from the people in your county.
I agree.
We have another question here. We're gonna have Chris.
Okay, so I'm just going to say I'm biased towards minivan, but the question asks, can you talk about the pros and cons of minivan versus paper? So one of the things with minivan is essentially once you put the data into your smartphone and sync it, it goes right into the database. There is another check step where a data team member has to commit it all to the database, but it goes into the Vote Builder system very quickly. There is a small learning curve with minivan. I don't think it's too terrible, and it can be a bit buggy, but I found it to be fairly useful. I don't think it's any more difficult than using a paper list to canvas with.
So you think right now it could be a good way to get the information updated quicker?
Yes, yes.
Does not have a volunteer ask if you're collecting
Yes.
votes.
Okay.
It doesn't have that.
Well, so there's another question about the volunteer ask, and this would have to be something that was set up on the back end when you're setting up the minivan. So your data person would have to set up a script.
So, Chris, can you just be clear on what you were just saying?
Okay,
Just
so
repeat.
so if you're going door-to-door canvassing, you would set up a script.
Right.
You would write a script, series of questions, and how you want to introduce yourself, the party, the issues at hand in that particular election.
Exactly.
But also these survey questions, which you can kind of see here on this sample call sheet. So, do you support a Dem? Strong support. You lean Democratic. You're unsure. These questions would also be in minivan, but someone has to put them in there for your volunteers to go out and canvass.
And so that's done before you would go out.
Yes.
So as you said, kind of like on the back side.
Yes, what they call the back end of Votebuilder. So someone on the data team would have to set this up, and then it would be sent out to your canvassing team. I hope that answers your question.
Some people.
Oh,
Any more questions? Do we have any more questions? If you have another question, please put it in your chat box at this time. Do you have any additional questions? I think we have one more coming in. Chris, can you read the next question?
surely. So does your county or precinct need volunteers and don't know where to start? So you can try looking up Dems in unaffiliated voters who vote regularly in primaries. This is good. Primaries or municipal elections. If someone's going to come out and vote for dog catcher, you can probably get them to go out and knock on doors.
Exactly.
They are committed. So, yes, if you look for the midterm election primary voters and the municipal election voters, primary voters too, these people are going to be reliable volunteers to start looking at, I would say.
Exactly. Most likely, most people who volunteered or voted in the municipal elections are probably great people to try to target when you're looking for some dedicated volunteers. Do we have the next question?
Okay, so
You've got 30
yeah,
minutes. Ask them, what do they
Okay.
want to know?
yeah.
Can you also just tell us a little bit about additional information that you all would like to know? Because we just did some very basic things about how to use the data in Votebuilder. Again, about not being the technical side, we really just want to give you all examples of ways that you can use Votebuilder, and just make sure you have, like, I always like to say, number one, everyone cannot have access to Votebuilder. You need to go to your county leader. And if you do not know who your county leader is, or you do not know who to contact, always go to North Carolina Democratic Party. Number two, you can use it to do call lists, walk lists, volunteer lists.
Yep.
You can use it to cut turf, my favorite term, always cutting turf. When we say that, that's just cutting a map of your area if you're trying to get ready to do some walking. You can use it to do surveys, your surveys for you.
Yep.
Did I miss anything, Chris?
No, I think that's that's a lot of what Votebuilder can do for you. If you have limited resources, Votebuilder helps you optimize your volunteer resources. And we all wish we had more people making phone calls and knocking on doors, but we don't. We have a limited supply of volunteers, and you have to figure out how to most effectively deploy them. And this tool helps you do that.
And one thing I also want to just reiterate, because I know we always get this, make sure you return back in the information, whether it's in minivan or in paper form. Please turn it back so we can keep the most updated information on your people in your precincts.
I'm going to let you answer this one because you have way more experience. So we have a question. Yeah. Do you recommend contacting unaffiliated voters?
You know what? It really depends on what you're trying to accomplish, whether you're going to contact them or not. If you're trying to accomplish them to persuade them on a particular issue, or you're trying to contact them to persuade them to join your efforts with a particular candidate, I would think about, and each county is a little different. So I think you would know your county best, you would know your unaffiliates best, and you would be able to determine if it would be beneficial for you to contact them or not. But I always like to say, I don't say no to any unaffiliates because we know that they can be swayed democratically or not sometimes. And so I think it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish, and do you know your unaffiliates in your county well.
So we have another question. What type of canvassing is best?
And I think I can't answer. You can only say depends on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to really get more people out to vote for your candidate, then of course persuasive canvassing is great. If you're just trying to get people out to go vote, I just need you to go out to vote, then GOTV is best. It really depends on the purpose of your canvassing and what you're trying to accomplish with going out there talking to people and knocking door to door. It could be I just want to survey the people who are already Democrat to make sure they know that elections are coming up and see if they need transportation. And that's like a get out to vote type of canvassing. That's really great. And that's normally if you're like maybe 4 weeks out before the municipal elections and you don't really have a lot of time to do anything but to make sure people are coming out to vote, then a GOT is great. You're knocking on the doors, making sure they know elections are coming up, making sure they know if they need transportation, where they can go for transportation, then that's a good time to have the GOTV. Now that it's early on in the municipal elections, which is coming up for a lot of counties, it may be great once candidates are declared to do more persuasive canvassing because it's early on. So your knock on the door is going to be different. So I think the time of the year, what you're trying to accomplish will really determine which one of these are best to use at the different times. We have more questions coming in.
We do. Here's another one. Is there a way to tell how an unaffiliated voter voted in the past? Yes. All the information is in the system. You can see which elections they voted in, which primaries they voted in. Of course, if they vote in a Democratic Party, they are going to have to vote in the general election for a Democrat.
Okay.
Right?
Good question. That's a good question.
Yes.
We have another one here too.
So during the election year, can you look up Dems that did not vote early so you can call those in your precinct before election day? Yeah, you can. And voters will be marked if they've early voted or not, or
Right.
the absentee ballot. These are all parameters that can be searched in the Votebuilder system. Yes, absolutely.
And that's a good question because I just said that maybe if you're 4 weeks out and early voting has already started and you want to do a get out to vote, you may want to include those who in your list who've early voted so you're not knocking on those doors.
Yeah.
So I think that's great to note that you can include that type of question with your Votebuilder when you're creating your list.
And that kind of reminds me, when you're in the early voting part of the election, your data team will probably be giving you new lists every day.
Right.
Because whoever has voted will be dropped from the list. So that it should update daily.
And so that's great to note that you can get most up-to-date information on your early voters.
Okay, another question. How do you avoid spending all of your time on your most likely voters?
I really think that depends on each county and what your vision is for your county and for your voting. I get this all the time, and we get this information all the time because it seems like we are contacting the same people who are already likely to vote. So I think you need to use a strategy when coming up with your questions for creating your list so you won't get the most likely voters. For example, if you have someone, as Chris said, if I always ask for, can you give me maybe the people who, I don't know, voted in the last 2 presidential elections or something. You know, it just really depends on who and how what you're trying to target.
Yes. So if you use the targeting tiers developed by the state,
yes,
the most likely voters, like you and I, should not be on these lists. You should be a gimme that we're going to show up to the polls.
So just a little information just about targeted
Okay.
tiers to the tiers, just a little bit, not a lot.
Okay.
Just a little bit.
I'll give you a little bit. Mainly, this is it's a mathematical function that the state party takes all the demographic data, figures out who is not going to show up to vote, who is going to show up to vote, and that's the targeting tiers for that particular election cycle.
Exactly. So I wanted him to explain that just a little bit, because that's one way you can determine who is more likely, who's not likely, but it's done mathematical on the backside. And they are split into tiers, and the state does this for you.
And again, if you don't want to get your most likely voters, you can maybe have anyone who has voted in a municipal primary removed from your list, because these people are going to come and vote.
Right.
That would be one strategy to use.
Any other questions? These are great questions, guys. I appreciate them. Just making sure, because if you have it, we're sure someone else have it.
This is a great question.
Yes.
So here's the question. On non-election years, can you use Votebuilder for phone banks to verify phone numbers and email addresses?
Yes, you can. And actually, this is what we're doing this year. It's so much work to be done during election and non-election years. The non-election years is a great time to do that type of work, where you're going through phone banking to see, are they working numbers, are the addresses correctly? That's really is a great time to do that. So when you do get to the voting season, some of the information is updated as much as possible.
That's a fantastic question and a good strategy to use too. You don't want to do all the housekeeping during the busy election.
No, you don't want to do that. Let's get it done before then. And just kind of like, the more you clean up the list now, the more effective and efficient the lists are when it's voting season. All right. Do we have any additional questions? We're here. Chris, been on the data team, can you just give an example of some of the lists that you have been asked to just kind of create?
So I was also working with my precinct to, I'll give you some of my personal examples. I really didn't know who to target, so we relied heavily on the state targeting tiers.
Yes.
We had a small number of dedicated volunteers, and we essentially created a phone banking list and took those people off our walk list.
Right.
So we weren't going to double contact people because we had limited resources. So we broke up the two lists, and we had a phone banking team and a door knocking team. So that's kind of what we did.
And you made a good point. If you're in a county and you're just kind of getting started and you really don't know where to start, I think starting with the tiered list that the state party has already kind of created for you would be a way to start.
Yeah.
If you don't know what to ask and how in depth you can get, you can start with that list there.
Yeah. If you've been doing this a while,
right,
you can probably ask for a more detailed list, a more tailored list to your area. I mean, you probably have a better idea of what your voters are like and what to ask for.
I also want to note, because counties are all different. Some counties have a lot of land and a lot of houses in between. Some have a lot of houses and a little land in between. And so using Votebuilder can really help. If I live, like in my district, we have a lot of businesses around. And so for me, I may want phone lists more so than canvassing lists, because I don't have as many of the houses because it's so many businesses. So for me, I would ask for like a phone list. But if you live in a place that have, like a neighborhood that's kind of cut off, canvassing may be the list that you may want to go with. And you can start with, as Chris was saying, using the tiers that the state party has already designated for you. So you can ask for, hey, I need a canvassing list, which is called a turf, a map.
Yes.
Cut out in your particular who you're trying to reach. Also, make sure that you are determining who you're targeting in that list, because it could be, you don't want to make sure you go to some like someone who's never voted, or those types of things.
Yeah. But you can also ask for lists on newly registered voters if you want to go track down these people who just moved into your area. and just got registered, you want to make sure they get to the polls, they know where they're going, give them all the information you want, kind of like a literature drop on their door. You can make a list like that. You can also look for students. Students are important to get out in the election, but they can be a little difficult to find. So there are specific student lists.
And that's very crucial because we all live in some counties that have a lot of universities and colleges and have students who are kind of transient and they might not be on your list. So this is a good time to look for those, newly voting students in your county. We have different information coming in.
Do you want to go?
I'll let you go first and I do mine.
Okay, I can tell you this. So I had never
asked the question.
Yeah, okay. So what is your best success story to share? So this was really interesting. I am, believe it or not, somewhat of an introvert, and I went canvassing door to door for the first time this last election cycle with Robert Reeves, which was a great experience for me, knocking on doors with him. We did come to one house where the husband was not too happy to see us. And, we had our list from Votebuilder, and we were kind of surprised because generally, if you're going to use the targeting tiers, you're not going to meet Republicans because they're not going to come out and vote for your candidate or your party. So he told us to get lost in so many words. And as we're leaving, his wife comes running out of the house and says, please excuse my husband. He's a jerk. I want to talk to you. And it was pretty silly. But that was my most interesting story from my time canvassing. I had a great time. If you want to go talk to people that feel the same way you do, canvassing is a great way to feel better about the country and the party and what's going on.
I think for me, my high success story was when we had a targeted list, and we were really targeting the new voters because at the time my daughter was 18, and we was trying to target the new African-American voters in my particular precinct. And so I went and asked for a voting list for, okay, if my daughter's 18, who else around here is 18? Are they registered voting or not? And when we got the list, my daughter and I was able to actually canvass those doors and get them out to vote. And it was just cutting the turf, getting them to know. We asked them, can you look up the most recently registered voter? They did something with the date of birth and all the type of things and got us that information back. And we were able to have a high turnout using that particular list. And we just used it just from knowing what our purpose is, knowing what we was targeted at. It was something small, but we was very targeted, and we were very specific in what we wanted to accomplish. And that's why I always say with anything you're asking for Votebuilder, Votebuilder is only a useful tool if you really kind of have an idea of what you're trying to accomplish. And I can't say that enough because there's so many different lists that you can ask for and so many different reasons you can use Votebuilder. So it's really worth just sitting down for a second to say, okay, am I trying to create a list to call? Or am I trying to create a list to walk? Or am I trying to create a list to get people out to vote? So I'm trying to get a list to persuade people to vote for my candidate. So it's really important to understand what your purpose is to make Votebuilder the most useful tool for you. The second thing I can't reiterate the most is make sure that if you're one of those that have a list, to get the information back to your data team or your Votebuilder person so they can have the most updated information for you. There's nothing more frustrating to have a list and everyone on your list, the houses, they don't live there anymore. So just get the most, just try to keep the most updated information back to your Votebuilder.
Or unfortunately, like maybe the data doesn't ever get put back into the system. So it would be wasted effort.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we don't want to do that. We have a lot of work to do and we don't want to waste any efforts. Do we have any other questions in our chat box at this time?
So maybe I'll just add that using the targeted tiers in my precinct, we had amazing turnout, but I think we saw a lot of that in Durham in general this year. close to 75, 76% turnout in my precinct.
Anything else?
Cybersecurity.
Go on one more slide. One more slide.
So we just wanted to give you all some feedback on different ways, some basic ways to use the Vote Builder, especially for those who are maybe very new to Vote Builder or have never heard of Vote Builder or just don't quite understand why I can't have access to Vote Builder. So just any feedback that you have for today, just please type it into the chat box. We want to make sure that we continue to adjust the webinars and improve on the webinars. Just make sure that we're getting the most important information, but yet simple information to those who will be viewing our webinars. We do have another webinar coming up, and we will get the information to you here. Chris?
Oh, okay. So it looks like there's a webinar coming up on cybersecurity, and this is Sunday, May 12th, 3 to 4 p.m. Just the title. That's it.
And then if you have any more questions or anything, you can contact Jenny McMillan or Julie Tonkovich about C2C trainings at c2ctrainings@orangenims.com.
Thank you.
Thank you all for listening. Again, we'll leave the chat room up just a little bit. If you have some questions, continue to type your questions into the chat rooms.